Princess Elena sat quietly in the palace garden, watching butterflies dance around the white roses her mother had loved so much. At 8 years old, she often found herself wondering about the woman she barely remembered. Her mother, Queen Isabella, had died when Elena was only 3, leaving behind nothing but fading memories and empty spaces in the grand palace. Queen Mother Margaret, Elena's grandmother, ruled the kingdom now. She was a stern woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, and eyes that seemed to see everything. The servants whispered that she had never approved of her son's choice to marry Isabella, a commoner who had captured the prince's heart with her kindness and gentle spirit. Elena had asked many times about her mother's belongings. "Where are her jewelry and dresses? Did she leave anything for me?" But Queen Margaret always gave the same cold response. "Your mother owned nothing of value. She came from nothing and left nothing behind." This answer never satisfied Elena. She remembered fragments of her mother: warm hands braiding her hair, soft singing at bedtime, and something that sparkled on her wrist when she reached to tuck Elena into bed. The little princess was certain her mother had worn a beautiful bracelet, but whenever she mentioned it, her grandmother's face would harden. "You're imagining things, child. Your mother never owned such jewelry. Stop filling your head with fairy tales." But Elena knew what she remembered. The bracelet had tiny charms that caught the light, and when her mother moved her hand, they made the softest tinkling sound. It was one of her clearest memories of Queen Isabella. The palace had many rooms, and Elena spent her days exploring them when her tutors weren't teaching her about royal duties. Her grandmother kept her on a strict schedule: lessons in the morning, proper behavior practice in the afternoon, and formal dinners where Elena had to sit straight and speak only when spoken to. One rainy afternoon, while walking through the East Wing, Elena noticed something odd. Most of the palace had portraits of various family members, but one hallway seemed different. The walls had faded rectangles where paintings had once hung, and when she asked a maid about it, the woman looked nervous. "Those were old paintings, Your Highness. The Queen Mother had them removed for cleaning." But the maid's eyes darted away, and Elena sensed there was more to the story. That evening at dinner, Elena gathered her courage. "Grandmother, why don't we have any portraits of my mother in the palace?" Queen Margaret's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Your mother was queen for only a short time. There wasn't opportunity for formal portraits. But surely there must be something? A painting? A photograph? Anything?" The temperature in the dining room seemed to drop. "Elena, you will not speak of this again. Your mother is gone, and dwelling on the past serves no purpose. You must focus on your future as a proper princess." Elena nodded obediently, but inside, her determination grew stronger. She began paying closer attention to the servants' conversations, hoping to learn something about her mother. The older staff members would sometimes stop talking when she approached, but she caught fragments of sentences. "Such a shame. The Queen Mother was so angry. That poor child doesn't know." Mrs. Hawthorne, the head housekeeper, had worked in the palace since before Elena was born. She was one of the few people who treated Elena with genuine warmth, often bringing her extra cookies or finding excuses to spend time with the lonely princess. Elena decided to approach her directly. "Mrs. Hawthorne, did you know my mother well?" The older woman's face softened. "Oh yes, dear. Queen Isabella was the kindest soul I ever met. She treated everyone with respect, from the gardeners to the ministers. She would often come to the kitchens just to chat with us. What happened to her things when she died?" Mrs. Hawthorne glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "That's not my place to say, Your Highness. But," she hesitated, as if wrestling with herself, "your mother loved you more than anything in this world." "Never doubt that." Elena pressed on. "Did she have a bracelet? A special one with charms?" The housekeeper's eyes widened slightly. "You remember that? You were so young." "So it was real. I knew it was real." "Hush now," Mrs. Hawthorne said quickly, looking around again. "These walls have ears, child. But yes, your mother had a very special bracelet. It was. It was precious to her. Where is it now? Did grandmother put it away somewhere safe? Mrs. Hawthorne's expression grew sad. I don't know, dear. After your mother passed, many things changed around here. That night, Elena lay awake thinking about her mother's bracelet. If it had been so precious, surely it would have been saved for her. Royal jewels were always passed down to daughters and granddaughters. It didn't make sense that it would just disappear. She decided to search for it herself. The palace was enormous, with countless rooms, closets, and storage areas. If the bracelet existed, it had to be somewhere. Elena began her secret mission the next day. During her free time, she explored parts of the palace she had never seen before. Storage rooms filled with old furniture, forgotten studies covered in dust, and library annexes where old books gathered cobwebs. In the North Tower, she found rooms that had clearly been her parents' quarters before her mother's death. Her grandmother had told her this area was off limits, but Elena's curiosity was stronger than her fear of punishment. The rooms had been stripped bare. No personal items remained, no hint that Queen Isabella had ever lived there. Even the wallpaper looked newer than in other parts of the palace. As if everything had been completely redone, Elena felt a surge of sadness. It was as if her mother had been erased from the palace entirely. She continued searching over the following weeks, becoming bolder and more thorough. She checked behind old wardrobes, inside forgotten chests, and even in the spaces between walls, where servants sometimes hid things. Her persistence finally paid off in the most unexpected place. While playing in her grandmother's study one afternoon, waiting for the Queen Mother to return from a meeting, Elena accidentally knocked over a heavy book from a high shelf. As she bent to pick it up, she noticed something strange about the wall behind the bookcase. There was a small gap, barely visible, between two wooden panels. When she pressed on it, one panel moved slightly inward. Elena's heart pounded as she realized she had discovered a hidden compartment. Looking around to make sure she was alone, she carefully pushed the panel aside. Inside was a small space containing several items: old letters tied with ribbon, a small painted portrait of a woman Elena didn't recognize, and most shocking of all, a jewelry box. With trembling hands, Elena opened the box. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay the most beautiful bracelet she had ever seen. Gold links connected tiny charms: a crown, a heart, a flower, and a small letter E. It was exactly as she remembered from her mother's wrist. But as Elena lifted the bracelet from the box, her joy turned to confusion and then to heartbreak. The bracelet was broken. Several charms were missing, and one of the gold links had been deliberately cut. Elena stared at the damaged jewelry, trying to understand what she was seeing. Why would her mother's precious bracelet be hidden away and broken? Why had her grandmother lied about its existence? As she examined the bracelet more closely, she noticed something else in the jewelry box. A small piece of paper folded beneath the velvet lining. With careful fingers, she pulled it out and unfolded it. In her mother's handwriting, she read, "For my darling Elena, to remember how much you are loved. Each charm represents a wish for your happiness. May you always know that you are treasured beyond measure. Your loving mother, Isabella." Tears filled Elena's eyes as she realized the truth. Her mother had left her this special gift, but someone had deliberately hidden it and broken it. The missing charms meant that her mother's wishes for her happiness had been literally torn apart. Elena carefully gathered the bracelet and the note, wrapping them in her handkerchief. She had found what she was looking for, but the discovery raised more questions than answers. Why would her grandmother do such a thing? What had happened between Queen Margaret and her mother that had led to such cruelty? As she heard footsteps approaching the study, Elena quickly replaced the panel and grabbed a book, pretending to read. But her mind was racing with plans. She would find out the truth about her mother and the bracelet, no matter what it took. The broken bracelet was now her most precious possession. But it was also evidence of a much deeper mystery that she was determined to solve. Elena kept the broken bracelet hidden in her room for 3 days, taking it out only when she was certain no one would disturb her. Each time she looked at it, she felt a mixture of joy and sadness. Joy because she finally had something that belonged to her mother, and sadness because someone had deliberately damaged this precious gift. She studied each remaining charm carefully. The tiny crown was slightly dented, the heart had a small scratch, and the flower was missing 2 petals. The letter E was the only charm that remained perfect. Elena wondered what the missing charms had looked like and why they had been removed. On the 4th day, Elena made a decision that would change everything. She would confront her grandmother directly. That evening, after dinner, Elena approached Queen Margaret in her private sitting room. The older woman was reading official documents by the fireplace, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Grandmother, I need to ask you something important." Queen Margaret looked up, noting the serious tone in her granddaughter's voice. "What is it, child?" Elena took a deep breath and pulled the broken bracelet from behind her back. "I found this. I know it belonged to my mother." The color drained from Queen Margaret's face. For a moment, she said nothing, staring at the jewelry in Elena's hands as if she were seeing a ghost. "Where did you find that?" The Queen's voice was barely a whisper. "In your study, in a hidden compartment, along with this note from my mother." Elena held up the piece of paper with her mother's handwriting. Queen Margaret's hands began to tremble slightly. She set down her documents and removed her glasses, suddenly looking much older than her 65 years. "Sit down, Elena," she said quietly. Elena perched on the edge of a chair, clutching the bracelet tightly. She had never seen her grandmother look so shaken. "You should not have gone through my private things," Queen Margaret began. But her usual stern tone was absent. Instead, she sounded tired and defeated. "Why did you hide it? Why did you tell me my mother left me nothing? And why is it broken?" Queen Margaret stood up slowly and walked to the window, looking out at the palace gardens. For a long moment, she was silent. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with old pain. Your mother was not what I wanted for your father." "But why?" "Mrs. Hawthorne said she was kind to everyone." "She was," Queen Margaret admitted, surprising Elena. "Isabella was kind, gentle, and genuinely good. That was precisely the problem." Elena frowned, confused. How could being good be a problem? Queen Margaret turned back to face her granddaughter. "Because kindness and gentleness are not always enough to rule a kingdom, child. Your mother came from a common family. She had no understanding of politics, no knowledge of how to navigate the complexities of royal life. She was naive. That doesn't explain why you hid the bracelet." The Queen sat down heavily in her chair. "After your mother died, I found that bracelet in her jewelry box. I also found her diary." Elena's eyes widened. "She kept a diary?" "Yes. And in it, I discovered that your mother had been making promises she couldn't keep." Queen Margaret walked to a different bookshelf and pulled out a leather-bound journal. Elena recognized her mother's handwriting on the cover. "Your mother wrote about you constantly. About how she wanted to change the kingdom, make it more fair for common people. She wrote about taking you to visit orphanages and hospitals, about teaching you to care for the poor. She had grand plans for your future." "Those sound like good plans," Elena said, still not understanding the problem. "They were good intentions, but impractical dreams. A princess cannot simply befriend commoners. A future queen cannot make emotional decisions based on kindness alone. Your mother was planning to raise you to be unsuitable for royal duties." Elena felt a flash of anger. "So you decided to steal her gift to me?" Queen Margaret's face hardened slightly. "I decided to protect you from unrealistic expectations. That bracelet represented everything your mother wanted you to become. Someone who would put emotion before duty, kindness before strength. You broke it. Why would you break it?" For the first time, Queen Margaret looked genuinely ashamed. I was angry. Angry at your mother for dying and leaving me to clean up her mess. Angry at your father for choosing her over more suitable wives. Angry at having to raise a granddaughter who might grow up with the same soft heart that made her mother weak." Elena stood up, clutching the bracelet to her chest. "My mother wasn't weak. Being kind isn't being weak. In the real world it often is, Queen Margaret replied sadly. I've spent 40 years learning that lesson. I watched your mother struggle with every decision because she couldn't bear to hurt anyone's feelings. I watched nobles take advantage of her gentle nature. I watched her cry herself to sleep because she couldn't solve everyone's problems. But she was happy, Elena protested. I remember her smiling and singing. She was happy with you, yes. But she was miserable as a queen. The pressure, the politics, the constant criticism from people who thought she wasn't good enough. It was destroying her. Elena felt tears starting to form. Is that really why you broke the bracelet? Because you thought she was weak? Queen Margaret was quiet for a long moment. No, she finally admitted. I broke it because I was heartbroken. Your mother was the daughter I never had. Even though I fought against accepting her, by the time I realized how much I had grown to love her, it was too late. She was gone. This confession surprised Elena. She had never heard her grandmother speak of love or emotion. When I found that bracelet and read her diary, I saw how much she loved you. How much hope she had for your future. And I knew that I could never live up to her expectations as your guardian. I could never give you the gentle, loving guidance she had planned to provide. Elena sat back down, her anger beginning to mix with confusion. So you hid everything about her? I thought it would be easier for both of us. I thought if we didn't dwell on what we had lost, we could focus on what needed to be done. You needed to become a strong, practical leader. I needed to teach you to make hard decisions without letting emotions cloud your judgment. But I wanted to know about her. I had a right to know about my own mother. Queen Margaret nodded slowly. You did. You absolutely did. And I was wrong to take that from you. Elena looked down at the broken bracelet in her hands. What were the missing charms? What? A book, representing education. A bird, representing freedom. And a small house, representing the simple life your mother sometimes wished she could give you. Why did you remove those specifically? Because I thought they represented the parts of your mother's dreams that were most dangerous for a future queen. I thought education should be formal and practical, not emotional. I thought freedom was a luxury you couldn't afford. And I thought longing for a simple life would make you weak. Elena traced the remaining charms with her finger. But you left the crown, the heart, the flower, and my initial. Yes, because even in my anger, I couldn't bring myself to destroy every piece of her love for you. The crown because you are a princess. The heart because I hoped you would always remember that you were loved. The flower because your mother planted those white roses in the garden for you. And your initial because you are her daughter. No matter what. They sat in silence for several minutes. Elena tried to process everything she had learned. Her grandmother wasn't the cold, unfeeling woman she had thought. Queen Margaret was someone who had made difficult choices based on fear and grief. I want to learn about her, Elena said finally. I want to read her diary. I want to know what she was really like. Queen Margaret hesitated. Some of what you'll read will be painful. She wrote about missing her family. About feeling overwhelmed by royal duties. She wrote about worrying whether she was a good mother to you. She was a good mother. I may not remember much, but I remember feeling safe and loved. She would be glad to know that. Elena stood up again, still holding the bracelet. I want to try to fix this. I want to find the missing charms, or have new ones made. Elena, that might not be wise. If people see you wearing your mother's jewelry, they'll ask questions about where it came from. They'll wonder why I never told you about it. Then we'll tell them the truth. We'll say you were keeping it safe until I was old enough to understand its importance. Queen Margaret looked surprised. You would do that for me? After what I did? Elena thought carefully before answering. Grandmother, I don't agree with what you did. I think you were wrong to hide my mother's things and break her bracelet. But I understand why you did it now. You were trying to protect me in the only way you knew how. That's very mature of you. My mother taught me to be kind. You taught me to think before I act. Maybe I need both lessons to be a good queen someday. Queen Margaret's eyes filled with tears for the first time Elena could remember. Your mother would be very proud of the young woman you're becoming. That night, Elena sat in her room, reading her mother's diary by candlelight. Queen Margaret had given it to her, along with a box containing the 3 missing charms. She had kept them all these years, unable to throw them away completely. As Elena read her mother's words, she began to understand both women better. Her mother had indeed struggled with royal duties, but she had never stopped trying to do what was right. She had worried about Elena's future but had trusted that love and kindness would guide her daughter down the right path. Queen Margaret had been wrong to hide these things, but she had acted out of love and fear rather than cruelty. She had genuinely believed she was protecting Elena from disappointment and preparing her for the harsh realities of royal life. Elena carefully examined the 3 return charms. The book was tiny but beautifully detailed. The bird had delicate wings that moved slightly when touched. The house was simple but perfectly crafted. She could see why her mother had chosen each one. As she prepared for bed, Elena made a decision. She would have the bracelet repaired, but she wouldn't simply restore it to its original state. She would add a new charm of her own, something that represented the lessons she had learned from both her mother and grandmother. Tomorrow, she would ask the palace jeweler to visit. She would commission a small charm in the shape of a bridge, representing the connection between her mother's kindness and her grandmother's strength. The bracelet would become not just a reminder of her mother's love, but a symbol of how she planned to honor both women who had shaped her life. Elena fell asleep that night with the bracelet under her pillow and her mother's diary on her nightstand, finally feeling like she understood where she came from and who she was meant to become. The palace jeweler, Master Thomas, arrived the next morning with his tools and materials. He was an elderly man who had served the royal family for over 30 years, and Elena trusted him to handle her mother's precious bracelet with care. "Your Highness, this is exquisite workmanship," he said, examining the damaged jewelry through his magnifying glass. "I can repair the broken links easily, but I want to make sure we preserve the original craftsmanship. I also want to add a new charm," Elena explained, showing him her sketch of the bridge. "Something that represents bringing different things together." Master Thomas nodded approvingly. "A beautiful symbol, Your Highness. I can craft that for you. The bridge will complement the existing charms perfectly." As the jeweler worked, Elena spent her time learning more about her mother from the diary entries and from conversations with older servants who remembered Queen Isabella. She discovered that her mother had indeed started several charitable programs that Queen Margaret had quietly discontinued after her death. Mrs. Hawthorne was particularly helpful, sharing stories about how Queen Isabella would visit the kitchens to learn recipes from her homeland, how she would personally deliver food baskets to struggling families in the village, and how she would spend hours reading to children in the palace nursery. "Your mother had a gift for making everyone feel important," Mrs. Hawthorne explained as they walked through the palace gardens. She remembered the names of every servant's children. She would ask about sick relatives and celebrate when someone's daughter got married or their son learned to read. Why did grandmother think that was wrong? I don't think she thought it was wrong, exactly. But Queen Margaret came from a different time, when royalty kept strict distance from common folk. Your mother's approach was unusual. Elena paused by the white roses her mother had planted. They had grown wild and beautiful over the years, spreading throughout that section of the garden. "I want to restart some of her programs," Elena announced. "Not exactly as they were, but in a way that honors both her vision and grandmother's practical concerns." Mrs. Hawthorne smiled. "That sounds wise, Your Highness." Mrs. Hawthorne, okay. When Elena approached Queen Margaret with this idea, she expected resistance. Instead, her grandmother listened thoughtfully as Elena outlined her plans. "I want to establish a reading program where palace staff can teach village children, not just giving them books, but actually helping them learn. And I want to create a small fund to help families during emergencies. Not handouts, but temporary assistance that helps them get back on their feet." Queen Margaret considered this carefully. "Those are more sustainable approaches than your mother's methods. She often gave help without ensuring it would create lasting change." How do you plan to manage these programs? I want to learn how to evaluate their effectiveness. I want to understand economics and administration better. I want to be kind like Mother, but also practical like you. A small smile crossed Queen Margaret's face. That shows wisdom beyond your years. 3 days later, Master Thomas returned with the repaired bracelet. Elena gasped when she saw it. The broken links had been seamlessly mended, and the new bridge charms sparkled alongside the original ones. It was even more beautiful than she had imagined. The bridge connects the crown and the heart, Master Thomas explained, pointing to how he had positioned the new charm, symbolically linking duty and love. Elena fastened the bracelet around her wrist, feeling its gentle weight and hearing the soft chiming of the charms as she moved. It felt like her mother's presence was with her again. That evening, Elena made another important decision. She invited Queen Margaret to join her for a walk in the garden where they could talk privately. "Grandmother, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Of course, do you regret the choices you made about my mother's things?" Queen Margaret stopped walking and looked at Elena seriously. "Yes, I do. Not because my concerns were entirely wrong, but because my methods were cruel. I should have found ways to guide you while still honoring your mother's memory." "I forgive you," Elena said simply. "But I need you to promise me something." "What's that?" "Promise me that from now on, we'll face problems together instead of you trying to protect me by hiding things. I'm going to be queen someday, and I need to learn how to handle difficult truths." Queen Margaret nodded slowly. "I promise, and I have something to give you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small key. "This opens a room in the West Tower. After your mother died, I couldn't bear to dispose of her personal belongings, so I had them moved there. I've been keeping that room locked for 5 years." Elena's eyes widened. "Her things are still here?" "Everything. Her books, her art supplies, her clothes, letters from her family. Even some gifts she had prepared for your birthdays that she never got to give you." Elena felt tears starting to form. "Can we go there now?" Together, they climbed the stairs to the West Tower. Queen Margaret unlocked a door Elena had never noticed before, and they stepped into what felt like a shrine to Queen Isabella's memory. The room was exactly as her mother had left it. Books were still open to pages she had been reading. Half-finished embroidery lay on a chair by the window. A small easel held a painting of the palace gardens with tiny Elena playing among the flowers. But what drew Elena's attention immediately was a wooden chest at the foot of the bed. Queen Margaret opened it carefully, revealing layers of carefully wrapped packages. "She prepared birthday gifts for you until you turned 18, Queen Margaret explained, her voice thick with emotion. "She wanted to make sure you would have something from her every year, even if she couldn't be there to give them to you herself." But Elena picked up the package marked age 8 and unwrapped it with trembling hands. Inside was a beautiful book of fairy tales from her mother's homeland, with a note that read, "My darling Elena, these are the stories my grandmother told me when I was your age. I hope they bring you as much joy as they brought me. Always remember that the best fairy tales are the ones we create with our own choices. Love, Mama." They sat on the floor of the room, surrounded by 5 years' worth of birthday presents. Each gift was thoughtful and personal. Art supplies for creativity, books for learning, jewelry for special occasions, and small toys that showed how well her mother had understood her growing daughter's changing interests. "She must have spent months preparing all of this," Elena said, overwhelmed by the evidence of her mother's love. "She did. Every evening after you went to bed, she would come here to work on something for your future." Elena found the present marked age 10 and opened it to discover a small crown, sized for a child, made of silver, and decorated with tiny gemstones that matched the colors of the charms on her bracelet. The note with this gift was longer. "My precious daughter, by the time you receive this, you will be growing into a young lady with your own thoughts and dreams. This crown is not like the heavy crowns worn for royal ceremonies. It is light and comfortable, meant to remind you that true leadership comes not from the weight of authority, but from the lightness of a heart filled with love and compassion. Wear it when you need to remember who you are and where you come from. You are my greatest treasure, and my brightest hope for the future. Elena placed the small crown on her head. It fit perfectly, as if her mother had somehow known exactly how she would grow. She wanted me to have choices, Elena realized, looking around at all the gifts that celebrated different aspects of learning and creativity. She wasn't trying to make me weak. She was trying to make me complete. Queen Margaret nodded. I see that now. I was so afraid of you becoming too emotional that I tried to eliminate emotion altogether. But emotions aren't weaknesses when they're balanced with wisdom. Elena stood up and walked to the window where her mother's easel sat. The painting showed such detail and love. Every flower in the garden was perfectly rendered, and tiny Elena in the picture had the same joyful expression Elena remembered having in that garden. I want to bring some of these things to my room, Elena decided. And I want to visit this room regularly. Not to live in the past, but to remember where I came from. That seems appropriate. Elena turned back to her grandmother with a new understanding. You've been grieving her too, haven't you? All these years, you've missed her as much as I have. Queen Margaret's composed exterior finally cracked completely, and tears began flowing freely. I loved her like my own daughter by the end. She brought so much light into this palace. When she died, I felt like all the warmth went out of our lives. But it didn't, Elena said, walking over to embrace her grandmother. The warmth is still here. We just forgot how to feel it because we were so busy trying to protect ourselves from more hurt. They held each other in the quiet room, surrounded by memories and gifts, and the lingering presence of the woman who had loved them both. Over the following months, Elena began wearing her mother's bracelet regularly. Court members noticed it and asked questions, which Elena answered honestly. It had belonged to her mother and had been kept safe until she was mature enough to care for it properly. She also began implementing her charitable programs, working with Queen Margaret to ensure they were both compassionate and sustainable. The reading program became particularly successful, with palace staff teaching not just children but adults who wanted to learn. Elena established a tradition of wearing her mother's small crown during these community visits, and it became a symbol of a new kind of royal leadership, one that valued both strength and kindness, both duty and love. On her 9th birthday, Elena opened the gift her mother had prepared for that age. It was a journal with a note that read, "My dearest Elena, I hope you will use this to record your own thoughts and dreams, just as I have done. Writing helps us understand ourselves and preserve our memories for the future. I would love to read your stories someday." Elena began writing in the journal that very evening, documenting not just her daily activities but her thoughts about leadership, her memories of her mother, and her growing relationship with her grandmother. She wrote about the bracelet and what each charm meant to her, and about her plans for the future. Years later, when Elena became queen herself, she would still wear both the bracelet and the small crown on important occasions. She would continue the charitable programs she had started as a child, and she would raise her own children with the same balance of love and wisdom that she had eventually found with Queen Margaret. But most importantly, she would never hide the truth from those she loved. She had learned that secrets, even well-intentioned ones, could cause more pain than the truths they were meant to protect. The broken bracelet had become a symbol of healing, not just the physical healing of broken links, but the emotional healing of a family that had been fractured by grief and fear. By facing the truth together, Elena and Queen Margaret had created something stronger than what had existed before. Elena often thought about the bridge charm she had added to her mother's bracelet. It had come to represent more than just connecting different ideas. It represented the possibility of building connections across differences, of finding common ground even after trust had been broken, and of honoring the past while creating something new for the future. The white roses in the garden continued to bloom each year, wild and beautiful, just like the love that connected 3 generations of strong women who had learned, through loss and discovery, that the greatest strength comes not from hiding our emotions, but from embracing them wisely.